I never thought my own daughter would abandon me on my 68th birthday, but there I was, standing in front of a crumbling cottage that smelled like mildew and broken dreams, watching her taillights disappear down that gravel road like I was nothing more than an inconvenience she'd finally managed to discard. If you've ever felt invisible to the people you gave everything to, you'll understand the kind of cold that settled into my bones that afternoon, and it had nothing to do with the October wind whipping off the Atlantic. My name is Eleanor Hartwell, and I'm about to tell you a story that changed everything I thought I knew about revenge, redemption, and the strange way life balances its scales when you least expect it. Before you go anywhere, I need you to do something for me. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching this from. I want to know I'm not alone in this. And please, check the description box below for more stories like mine, because I have a feeling some of you out there have been thrown away too, and you need to know how this ends. The cottage stood like a rotting tooth against the coastline, its white paint peeling in long, sad strips that fluttered in the breeze like surrender flags. Shingles missing from the roof. Windows so salt-stained I could barely see through them. The porch sagged in the middle like it was tired of holding itself up, and honestly, I understood the feeling. This was what my daughter Rebecca, my only child, the girl I'd sacrificed my career for, my savings for, my whole damn life for, considered an appropriate retirement gift. "Consider this your retirement present, Mom," she'd said, not even bothering to turn off the engine of her brand new Mercedes SUV, the one I'd helped her make the down payment on just 6 months ago. "Enjoy your solitude." Solitude. She made it sound like a luxury spa treatment instead of what it really was, exile. I'd spent 43 years as a high school English teacher in suburban Connecticut, pouring my heart into other people's children while Rebecca grew up resenting every moment I wasn't focused solely on her. After her father, my ex-husband David, left us when she was 12 for his dental hygienist, how's that for a cliché? I worked 2 jobs to keep Rebecca in her private school, to pay for her dance lessons and summer camps and eventually her overpriced liberal arts education. I drove a 15-year-old Honda while she complained that her friends all had newer cars. I wore the same winter coat for a decade while she updated her wardrobe every season. And this was my reward. The cottage keys were still warm in my palm from where Rebecca had pressed them into my hand with all the tenderness of someone disposing of evidence. She hadn't even helped me with my suitcases. Just 3 of them, because apparently, retirement meant I wouldn't need most of my belongings. Those were already on their way to a storage unit I couldn't afford, in a town I'd probably never see again. "You'll love it here," she'd said, scrolling through her phone even as she spoke. "It's quiet. Peaceful. You always said you wanted to live by the ocean." That was true, I had said that. But I'd meant it as a someday dream, a retirement fantasy to be enjoyed after a lifetime of hard work, not a dumping ground for an inconvenient mother who'd become too expensive and too opinionated for her daughter's newly minted social circle. You see, Rebecca had married well, a venture capitalist named Preston Whitmore III, all old money and older bloodlines. And apparently having a public school teacher for a mother didn't fit the image they were cultivating in Greenwich. I stood there on that broken porch, listening to the waves crash against the rocky shore about 100 yards down the slope, and I felt something I'd never allowed myself to feel before. I hated my daughter. Not the passionate, burning hate that consumes you, but the cold, factual kind. The kind where you suddenly realize you've been loving a person who stopped existing years ago, maybe never existed at all. The front door stuck when I tried to open it, swollen from the damp sea air. I had to put my shoulder into it, and when it finally gave way, the smell that hit me nearly knocked me backward. Mold, definitely. Mice, probably. And something else, something deeper and sadder. The smell of a place that hadn't been loved in a very long time. The interior was worse than I'd imagined. Furniture covered in sheets so dusty they looked gray instead of white. A kitchenette with appliances that belonged in a museum. Floors that creaked ominously with every step. One bedroom barely big enough for the rusted metal bed frame inside it. A bathroom where I didn't even want to look at the toilet too closely. This was my retirement present. I sat down on one of the sheet-covered chairs, and a cloud of dust rose up around me like a ghost. My hands were shaking, from cold, from shock, from something that felt dangerously close to despair. I was 68 years old. I had exactly $743 in my checking account. My pension wouldn't start for another 2 months. Rebecca had made it clear this morning that I shouldn't expect any financial help from her and Preston. They were restructuring their portfolio and needed to prioritize their own family's future. Never mind that I was her family. Never mind that their 2 children, my grandchildren, had been instructed to call me Eleanor instead of Grandma because it sounded younger and less conventional. I looked around that miserable cottage and realized something that sent ice through my veins. Rebecca had planned this. The timing wasn't accidental. Dropping me off right before my pension kicked in a place remote enough that I couldn't easily leave, with just enough money to barely survive but not enough to fight back. She wanted me out of her life, and she'd found the perfect way to do it without looking like the villain in her social circle. "We're giving Mom a seaside cottage for her retirement," she could tell her friends, all sympathy and generosity. She always wanted to live by the ocean. We thought it would be perfect for her. I stood up and walked to the window, wiping away enough grime to see outside. That's when I noticed the lighthouse. It stood about 200 yards up the coast, a tall, white tower with a red cap that looked remarkably well-maintained compared to everything else around here. Even from this distance, I could see that someone cared for it. Fresh paint, tended grounds, lights glowing warmly in the keeper's house attached to its base. As I watched, the door to the keeper's house opened, and a woman stepped out. Even from where I stood, I could tell she was older, maybe around my age, but she moved with a confidence I couldn't remember ever possessing. She wore practical clothes, jeans, a heavy sweater, boots, and her silver hair was pulled back in a braid that hung down her back. She looked out toward the ocean, then turned and seemed to notice my cottage, notice me watching from the grimy window. She raised one hand in a wave. I was so startled I actually stepped back from the window. When was the last time a stranger had acknowledged my existence just to be kind? I couldn't remember. I raised my own hand tentatively, knowing she probably couldn't see me clearly through the filthy glass, but needing to respond anyway. The woman smiled, I could see that much, and then turned back toward her lighthouse. I spent the rest of that day trying to make the cottage habitable. I found cleaning supplies under the kitchen sink, ancient and probably useless, but I used them anyway. I scrubbed and swept and dusted until my back screamed and my arthritic hands cramped. I made the bed with the sheets I'd brought from Connecticut, the good ones Rebecca had never wanted, claiming they were too old-fashioned. I organized my meager belongings in the closet and dresser. I tried not to think about the life I'd left behind, the modest but comfortable home I'd owned free and clear until Rebecca convinced me to sell it. "You don't need all that space," she'd said. "It's just you now. And the market's so good, you could make a fortune and finally enjoy your retirement." The fortune had gone into a trust fund for her children's education. My idea initially, but Rebecca had been so enthusiastic about it, so grateful, I'd felt like maybe I was doing the right thing. "You're such an amazing grandmother," she'd said, hugging me tight. "The kids are so lucky to have you." The kids who now called me Eleanor. As darkness fell, I realized I hadn't eaten all day. The cottage came with an old refrigerator that hummed loudly and irregularly, but it was empty. The cupboards held nothing but mouse droppings and cobwebs. I'd have to find a store tomorrow, but tonight, I'd just have to be hungry. I'd been hungry before. I lay in that metal bed, wrapped in my good sheets, listening to the ocean and the wind and the cottage groaning around me like something in pain. Somewhere in the darkness, I could hear the lighthouse beam rotating, its light sweeping past my window every few seconds. Sweep. Darkness. Sweep. Darkness. Like a heartbeat. And I thought about my daughter, comfortable in her 7-bedroom house in Greenwich, probably not thinking about me at all. I thought about Preston, who'd never liked me, who'd once told Rebecca at a family dinner, not knowing I was in the next room, that I was dead weight they needed to strategically cut loose. I thought about my grandchildren, being raised to value money and status over everything else, being taught that love was conditional and grandmothers were disposable. But mostly, I thought about that woman in the lighthouse. That wave. That simple acknowledgement of my existence. If you've ever been at the absolute bottom, you know how much the smallest kindness can mean. How it can be the difference between giving up and holding on for just one more day. I decided to hold on. Just for one more day. Just to see what tomorrow might bring. Because there was something else I'd felt when Rebecca drove away, something that had been growing in the dust and anger and hurt of that long afternoon. It wasn't despair anymore. It was something sharper, something that gave me energy instead of taking it away. It was the beginning of a plan. Morning came cold and gray, the kind of October dawn that makes you feel like summer was just a rumor someone made up. I'd barely slept, my body too used to my old mattress, my mind too busy circling around the same bitter thoughts like water down a drain. But I got up anyway, because that's what women my age do, we get up. We've been getting up for decades through heartbreak and betrayal and disappointment, and we don't know how to stop. I was attempting to make coffee in the ancient percolator I'd found in a cupboard when I heard the knock at the door. 3 sharp raps, confident and clear. My heart did a strange little jump. Rebecca? Had she come back? Had she realized what she'd done and... But no. When I opened the door, it was the woman from the lighthouse. Up close, she was striking in a way that had nothing to do with conventional beauty. Deep lines around her eyes and mouth that spoke of laughter and hardship in equal measure. Those lines around the eyes, if you've lived long enough, you know how to read them. Hers were the good kind, the kind that came from smiling at the sun and squinting at the sea, not from bitterness. She had to be in her 70s, but she stood straight as a mast, and her eyes, pale blue, almost gray, were sharp and measuring. "I'm Dorothy Fletcher," she said, her voice carrying the faint rasp of someone who'd spent a lifetime breathing salt air. "I own the lighthouse up the way. Saw you arrive yesterday and figured you might need some things." She held out a basket covered with a blue-checked cloth. The smell coming from it made my knees weak. Fresh bread, still warm. Real food. "Eleanor Hartwell," I managed, taking the basket with hands that shook slightly. Thank you. You didn't have to." "You have that look," Dorothy said, cutting through my stammering with a directness I'd forgotten people could have. "The look of someone who's been dropped somewhere they didn't choose to be. Am I wrong?" I could have lied. I could have played the gracious role, pretended everything was fine, maintained the dignity I'd clung to for 68 years. But there was something about this woman, something about the way she looked at me like she actually saw me, that made the truth come tumbling out. "My daughter left me here yesterday," I said. "Called it a retirement present. I have $700 to my name and no way to leave." Dorothy nodded like I'd just confirmed something she'd already suspected. "Your daughter, huh? Let me guess. Married well, got herself a new life, and decided you didn't fit the picture anymore." I blinked. "How did you?" "Because I had a son who did the same thing to me 15 years ago," she said flatly. "Different details, same story. That's why I know that look. That's why I'm here." She gestured toward the cottage. "You eaten yet?" "No, there's nothing in the house. I was going to try to find a store." "Store's 12 miles inland, and unless you've got a car hidden somewhere, you're not getting there on foot." "Come on. I've got breakfast going, and we need to talk." If you've ever met someone who changed your life in the first 5 minutes, hit that subscribe button. Because Dorothy Fletcher saved me, though I didn't know it yet. And if you think you know where this story is going, trust me, you don't. Check the description box for more stories about women who refused to stay invisible. Dorothy's lighthouse keeper's house was everything my cottage wasn't. Warm, clean, cared for, alive. The kitchen smelled like coffee and bacon and something cinnamon. Sunlight poured through spotless windows that looked out over the ocean. Books lined every wall, hundreds of them, their spines worn from reading. Photographs covered the mantel above a fireplace where a real fire crackled. "Sit," Dorothy commanded, pointing to a sturdy wooden chair at her kitchen table. She poured coffee into a mug that said "World's Okayest Lighthouse Keeper," and set it in front of me, then went back to the stove where eggs were sizzling in a pan. I sat. I drank the coffee. I tried not to cry. "So," Dorothy said, sliding a plate of eggs, bacon, and toast in front of me. "Eleanor Hartwell. Tell me your story. All of it. Don't leave anything out." And I did. God help me, I told this stranger everything. About David leaving, about raising Rebecca alone, about the sacrifices and the love and the endless, exhausting effort of trying to be enough. About Rebecca's marriage to Preston, about watching my daughter transform into someone I didn't recognize, someone harder and colder and more calculating. About my grandchildren being taught not to call me grandma. About the house I'd sold and the trust fund and this cottage that was really an exile. Dorothy listened without interrupting, her face growing harder with each detail. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment, staring into her own coffee cup. My son's name was William, she said finally. Billy, I called him, even after he got too big and important for nicknames. I was a marine biologist before I retired here. Published papers, won grants, taught at universities. Billy's father, my husband, died when Billy was 16. Aneurysm. Just dropped dead one Tuesday morning while making pancakes. She paused, her fingers tight around her mug. I raised Billy alone after that. Put him through medical school on my salary and my grief. He became a surgeon, married a woman from a prominent family. Real estate developers, old money like your daughter's husband. And just like your Rebecca, Billy decided his mother didn't fit his new image. The brilliant marine biologist became just a woman who studied fish. An embarrassment. What did he do? I asked quietly. Worse than your daughter, if you can believe it. He had me declared mentally incompetent. Got a lawyer, got a judge, had me evaluated by a psychiatrist who spent exactly 20 minutes with me before declaring I was suffering from dementia. I wasn't, of course. But that didn't matter. Within 3 months, Billy had control of my finances, my properties, everything. He sold my house, liquidated my retirement accounts, and stuck me in a nursing home. I felt sick. How did you? How did I get out? Dorothy's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. I fought. It took me 2 years, but I found a lawyer who believed me, got a new evaluation, proved I was perfectly competent. Got everything reversed. But by then, Billy had spent or hidden most of my money. I had enough left to buy this lighthouse and its keeper's house. It was abandoned, condemned actually, but I fixed it up myself. Been here 13 years now. Do you talk to him? Your son? No. And I never will. Dorothy's voice was hard as stone. I learned something in that nursing home, Eleanor, sitting there watching the ocean through a window I wasn't allowed to open. I learned that some betrayals are too deep to forgive. And I learned that the best revenge isn't getting even. It's building a life so good, so full, so completely yours that the people who try to destroy you become irrelevant. She leaned forward, her pale eyes intense. But that doesn't mean we can't have a little fun along the way. What do you mean? I mean I've been waiting 15 years for the universe to send me someone like you. Someone who understands. Someone who's ready to stop being a victim and start being a problem. Dorothy smiled, and it was the most terrifying and exhilarating thing I'd seen in years. Your daughter thinks she's won. She thinks you're going to fade away here, quiet and convenient and eventually forgotten. But we're going to prove her wrong. My heart was pounding. How? First things first. You're going to move into my guest room. That cottage is uninhabitable, and we both know it. You'll stay here while we figure things out. No arguments. I've got plenty of space and not enough company. Second, we're going to get you stable. I've got connections in town, can help you find some work to tide you over until your pension starts. Third. She paused, her smile widening. Third, we're going to make your daughter very, very uncomfortable. I don't understand. You will. But I need to know something first, Eleanor. Are you angry? I mean really, truly angry? Angry enough to stop being nice? Angry enough to stop worrying about what people will think? Because if you're going to spend the rest of your life being the bigger person, being dignified and gracious while your daughter erases you, then I can't help you. But if you're ready to fight back. Was I angry? I thought about Rebecca's face yesterday, how she couldn't even look at me when she drove away. I thought about Preston's smirk at family dinners, about my grandchildren being taught to forget me. I thought about 43 years of teaching, of caring, of giving everything I had, and ending up alone in a crumbling cottage with $700 and no plan. I'm angry, I said, and my voice sounded different even to my own ears. Stronger. Harder. I'm so angry I can barely breathe. Dorothy reached across the table and gripped my hand. Her palm was calloused and warm. Good. Then let's get to work. Over the next few hours, Dorothy laid out what she called Phase 1. It was simple, really. Brilliant in its simplicity. We were going to make me visible again. Not to Rebecca, not yet, but to the world. Dorothy had friends, connections from her academic life, people who still respected her work and her name. She made phone calls while I listened, watched her transform from a lighthouse keeper into the formidable Dr. Dorothy Fletcher, marine biologist and published researcher. By noon, she'd gotten me an interview for a part-time position at the local library, 20 hours a week at $15 an hour. Not much, but enough to survive on with my pension coming soon. She'd also connected me with a woman who ran a tutoring service for struggling high school students. Apparently, retired English teachers were in high demand. Another income stream. Money is power, Dorothy said, hanging up from her 5th call. Your daughter made you powerless by controlling your finances. We fix that first. Then we move to Phase 2. What's Phase 2? Social media, Dorothy said, and her smile was wicked. Your daughter lives and breathes social media, doesn't she? Instagram, Facebook, all of it. I nodded. Rebecca posted constantly, carefully curated photos of her perfect life, her perfect children, her perfect house. She had thousands of followers, mostly other wealthy Connecticut mothers who all seemed to be competing in some unspoken contest of who could look the most effortlessly elegant. Good, Dorothy said. Because we're going to give her followers a different story. A real story. About a daughter who abandons her mother. About privilege and cruelty and what happens behind the Instagram filters. She'll know it's me. She'll just ignore it. She won't be able to ignore it when it goes viral. And it will go viral, Eleanor, because people are desperate for authenticity right now. They're tired of the fake perfection. A story about a real woman, a retired teacher, abandoned by her ungrateful daughter? That's the kind of thing that catches fire. I felt a flutter of something in my chest. Fear? Excitement? I couldn't tell the difference anymore. Won't that just make me look pathetic? Not the way we're going to tell it. We're not going to make you the victim, Eleanor. We're going to make you the hero. The woman who survives. The woman who builds a new life. The woman who refuses to disappear just because her daughter wants her to. Dorothy leaned back in her chair, studying me. And there's one more thing. Something I learned the hard way. When people try to erase you, the best response isn't to prove you still exist. It's to become someone better than who you were before. Someone they can't ignore. Someone who makes them wish they'd been kinder. That night, after Dorothy had shown me to her guest room, a cozy space with its own bathroom and a window overlooking the ocean, I lay in a real bed with clean sheets and a warm quilt and thought about what she'd said. About becoming someone better. About revenge that didn't destroy you in the process. I thought about Rebecca, probably sleeping peacefully in her Greenwich mansion, confident she'd solved her mother problem. And I smiled into the darkness. Because she had no idea what was coming. 3 months later, I barely recognized my own life. True to her word, Dorothy had orchestrated a transformation that felt like something out of a movie, except it was real and it was mine and it was glorious. The library job had turned into something I actually loved, helping kids with their college application essays, running a weekly book club for local retirees, even teaching a creative writing workshop on Thursday evenings. The tutoring brought in extra income and reminded me why I'd become a teacher in the first place. But it was the social media that changed everything. Dorothy had insisted we do it right. Not a bitter rant, not a pity party, but a journal. I called it the Sea Change Project. Essays about rebuilding life after betrayal, about finding dignity in exile, about learning to matter again when the world has written you off. I wrote about the cottage, about Dorothy, about the small kindnesses of strangers and the large cruelties of family. I wrote about what it means to be an older woman in a culture that tosses you aside the moment you stop being useful. And I wrote about Rebecca, though not by name at first. Just my daughter. Just the facts, told plainly and without embellishment, because the truth was devastating enough without decoration. The first post got 43 likes, mostly from Dorothy's friends. The second got 200. By the third week, I had 15,000 followers. By the end of the second month, I had 175,000. People shared my posts with comments like, "This is my mother's story, and every woman needs to read this," and "Why am I crying in the Target parking lot?" A podcast reached out. Then another. Then a literary agent who wanted to know if I'd ever considered writing a memoir. Major publications started picking up my story, not clickbait versions, but real articles about elder abuse and financial manipulation and the way adult children sometimes treat their aging parents like inconvenient furniture. And that's when Rebecca noticed. The first message came through Facebook. She'd blocked my phone number months ago. Just 4 words, "We need to talk." I didn't respond. The second message came 2 days later, longer. "Mom, I don't know what you think you're accomplishing with this social media thing, but it's embarrassing. People are asking me questions. Preston's partners saw one of your posts. This needs to stop." I showed it to Dorothy. She read it and laughed, a sound like waves breaking on rocks. "She's scared." "Good. Don't respond yet. Let her sit with it." But Rebecca didn't sit with it. She escalated. She started her own posts, carefully worded, playing the victim. It breaks my heart when family members use social media to spread hurtful lies. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is create healthy boundaries, even with parents. #blessed, #family first, #choosing peace. Her followers, those polished, privileged women, rallied around her with comments of support. "You're so brave. Don't let anyone guilt you. Family trauma is so hard." What Rebecca didn't count on was that my followers would find her posts. Within hours, her comments section was flooded with people who'd read my essays, who knew the real story. "How do you sleep at night? Your mother deserves better. This is elder abuse." Her carefully maintained Instagram perfect life suddenly had cracks in it, and her followers could see right through them. She made her accounts private. But the internet is forever, and screenshots spread like wildfire. Local Connecticut news picked up the story. Then state news. Then it went national, a Today Show segment about financial elder abuse featuring my story, my face, my words. Rebecca's world was imploding, and I should have felt victorious. But instead, I felt something more complicated. Something Dorothy hadn't prepared me for. If you've ever gotten the revenge you thought you wanted and found it tasted wrong, you'll understand what happened next. Stay with me, this is where everything changes. And please, share this with someone who needs to hear it. Check the description box for more stories about women who found their power. The phone call came on a Tuesday evening in January. Not from Rebecca, but from her son, my grandson Tyler. He was 14 now, almost 15. I hadn't heard his voice in over a year. "Eleanor," he said, and I could hear something broken in the way he said my name. Not my name, really. Just Eleanor. Never Grandma. But there was pain in it now, confusion. "Tyler. Hi, sweetheart. I read your blog thing. The one everyone's sharing." A pause. Long enough that I thought maybe he'd hung up. Then, "Is it true? Did Mom really do all that stuff?" My throat tightened. This was the moment Dorothy had warned me about. The moment, she'd said, when you have to decide what kind of person you're going to be. Because revenge is easy, Eleanor. Mercy is what costs you. "Yes," I said to my grandson. "It's all true." "She said you were lying. She said you were trying to embarrass her. She's been crying a lot. Dad's really mad. He says you're ruining everything." "I'm sure he does. But if it's true..." Tyler's voice cracked. "If it's true, then I don't know who my mom is. And I don't know if I can." He stopped. Breathed hard. "Why didn't you tell me? Before, I mean. Why did you just let us stop calling you Grandma?" "Because I loved you," I said simply. "Because I thought maybe if I was quiet and cooperative, your mother would let me keep seeing you. Because I was scared of losing you completely." "But you lost us anyway." "I did." Another long pause. Then, "Can I come visit you? Mom doesn't know I'm calling. But I found the address from one of your posts. I could take the train, maybe during spring break. I have some money saved." And there it was. The choice Dorothy had prepared me for but couldn't make for me. I could say yes. I could let Tyler come, could start rebuilding a relationship with at least one of my grandchildren. It would feel like winning. But it would destroy what was left of Rebecca's family. Tyler would defy her to see me. She would fight back. Their family would tear itself apart, and I would be the reason, justified or not. Or I could say no. I could protect Tyler from this war, even though it meant more loneliness for me. Even though it meant letting him think I didn't want him. Tyler, I said, I would love nothing more than to see you. But not like this. Not in secret, not as a rebellion against your mother. When you're older, when you can make that decision as an adult, I'll be here. I'll always be here. But right now, you need to be a kid. You need to love your mother even though she's made terrible mistakes. Because that's what love is sometimes. Choosing to see people at their best even when they're showing you their worst. But that's not fair. No, I agreed. It's not. But life rarely is, sweetheart. And I'm tired of being angry. I'm tired of fighting. I got what I needed from all of this. I got my voice back, my power back, my sense of self back. I don't need to destroy your mother to prove I matter. I already know I matter. We talked for another 20 minutes. I told him about the library, about Dorothy and the lighthouse, about the book club and the writing workshop. I told him I was happy, which surprised me because I realized it was true. I told him I loved him and his sister, that I would always love them, that when they were ready, I would be waiting. After we hung up, I sat in Dorothy's kitchen. My kitchen now really, since I'd been living there for months, and cried. Not from sadness, but from the exhausting relief of choosing the harder path. Of choosing to stop the cycle instead of continuing it. Dorothy found me there. She didn't ask what happened. She just sat down across from me, poured us both generous glasses of red wine, and waited. I talked to Tyler, I said finally. He wanted to visit. I told him no. Dorothy nodded slowly. That must have hurt. Like you wouldn't believe. But Dorothy, I realized something. If I let him come, if I keep this war going, I become exactly what Rebecca accused me of being. Someone who puts her own needs above what's best for her family. Tyler needs to be a kid. He needs to not be caught in the middle of this. And Rebecca. I paused, searching for the right words. Rebecca needs a chance to fix this herself. Not because I forced her to, not because the internet shamed her into it, but because she looks at her life and decides she wants to be better. And if she doesn't? If she never apologizes, never tries to make amends. I thought about that. Really thought about it. Then I'll still be okay. Because I've built something here that's mine. I have work I care about, people who value me, a purpose that doesn't depend on her validation. I got my revenge, Dorothy. I made her see me, made her feel the consequences of her actions. That's enough. Dorothy raised her wine glass. To knowing when to stop. To choosing peace over victory. To being the grandmother Tyler deserves, even if he doesn't understand it yet. We clinked glasses. We drank. And I felt something shift inside me, some final piece of the anger crumbling away. The next morning, I wrote a new post for the Sea Change Project. Not about Rebecca, not about betrayal. About forgiveness. About the way holding on to hate poisons you more than it hurts the people you hate. About building a life that doesn't require revenge to feel meaningful. It was my most read post ever. 300,000 shares in 2 days. Messages poured in from people thanking me for giving them permission to let go, to move on, to choose themselves without needing to destroy someone else in the process. And 3 weeks later, I received a letter. Actual paper, actual handwriting, postmarked from Greenwich, Connecticut. Dear Mom, it began. The letter sat on my kitchen table for 3 days before I could bring myself to open it. Dorothy respected my hesitation, never pushing, just occasionally glancing at the envelope as she passed by. It was thick, multiple pages by the feel of it. Rebecca's handwriting on the front, her name in the return address corner. The sight of it filled me with a complicated mixture of hope and dread that felt exactly like being a mother again. On the 3rd morning, I finally opened it. My hands shook as I unfolded the pages, 7 of them, covered front and back in Rebecca's careful script. "Dear Mom," it began. "I've started this letter 43 times. I've written apologies, explanations, excuses, justifications. I've written angry defenses and tearful confessions. I've blamed you, blamed Preston, blamed my childhood and my insecurities and the pressure of fitting into a world I never felt like I belonged to. But none of that matters, does it? Because the truth is simple and terrible. I abandoned my mother because I was ashamed of where I came from, and I thought erasing you would make me belong somewhere better. I was wrong about everything. I had to stop reading. Put the letter down. Breathe." Dorothy appeared with coffee and sat down across from me, silent support. I picked the letter back up. "I've spent the last few weeks reading everything you've written. Every essay, every post. I've read the comments from strangers who see you more clearly than I did. I've watched the interview you did with that podcast about rebuilding after betrayal. And Mom, I've looked at myself, really looked, and I hate what I see. Tyler called me out after he talked to you. He was so angry. He said I'd thrown away the best person in his life for no reason except that I cared more about what Preston's mother thought than about what was right. He was correct. Emma feels the same way, though she's younger and doesn't know how to articulate it yet. She asked me last week why we couldn't visit Grandma anymore. Yes, she said Grandma, not Eleanor, and I realized I'd been so busy training them to fit into this world I'd chosen that I forgot to teach them how to be decent human beings. Preston and I are in therapy. Not marriage counseling, individual therapy. It turns out when you build a life on image and status and proving you're better than where you came from, the foundation is pretty unstable. When your posts went viral, when people started recognizing me at school pickups and charity events, Preston's first instinct was to find lawyers, to threaten you with defamation suits. But his father, Preston III, the man whose approval I've been chasing for a decade, shut that down immediately. He read your essays and told Preston that I'd disgraced the family name far more than you ever could. He said that in his family, they took care of their elders, and what I'd done to you was unconscionable. That's the word he used. Unconscionable. I lost friends over this, Mom. Real friends, or at least people I thought were friends. But I also found out who I could trust. My friend Sarah, you met her once at that Christmas party. She called me after she read your blog. She said her mother had died 2 years ago, and she'd give anything for one more conversation with her. She said I was squandering something precious and irreplaceable, and she couldn't stand by and watch me do it anymore. She made me look at what I'd become. I need you to understand something. I'm not writing this because the internet turned against me, though that was humiliating. I'm not writing because Preston's family pressured me, though they did. I'm writing because I read your post about forgiveness, the one where you talked about Tyler's call and how you told him to wait, to be a kid, to not get caught in the middle of our dysfunction. I read how you chose his well-being over your own need to see him, and I realized you were still being my mother, still protecting my children, still putting their needs first, even after everything I'd done to you. That's when I understood I'd lost something I might never get back. Not your love, I know you love me even now, because that's who you are. But your respect. Your trust. The belief that I was a good person who would do the right thing. I don't know if I can earn those back. I don't know if I deserve to try. But I want to try, Mom. If you'll let me. I'm not asking you to forgive me immediately. I'm not asking you to come back to Connecticut or to fit back into my life on my terms. I'm asking if I can come visit you. If I can meet this Dorothy you write about, see this lighthouse and this library and this life you've built without me. I'm asking if you'll let me sit at your table and listen to you talk about your book club and your students and your sea glass collection. I'm asking for the chance to know this version of you, the version that's strong and independent and doesn't need me to feel whole. And I'm asking if someday, when I've proven I've changed, you might consider being Grandma again. Not Eleanor. Not Mom's mother, or whatever other ridiculous thing I tried to make you. Just Grandma. The way you always should have been. Preston and I are bringing the kids out of private school. Moving them to the public school in our district, the one I went to, actually, before you scrimped and saved to send me to Westbridge Academy. Funny how what I once resented is now what I'm grateful for. We're downsizing the house. Setting up college funds for the kids that don't depend on trust funds from my in-laws. learning to live on less and appreciate more. It sounds like penance when I write it out, but it's not. It's just trying to be the person I should have been all along. Tyler asks about you every day. Emma has been drawing pictures of lighthouses, though she doesn't entirely understand why. They miss you. I miss you. I miss the mother who used to read me poetry while we ate breakfast, who taught me that books were portals to other lives, who showed me how to be strong by being strong herself every single day. I know I don't deserve an answer. I know I hurt you in ways that might be unforgivable. But if there's any chance, any possibility that we might rebuild something from the wreckage I created, I'm asking you to tell me how. I love you, Mom. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Your daughter, Rebecca. I set the letter down and realized my face was wet. Dorothy pushed a box of tissues across the table without a word. She wants to visit, I said, my voice rough. She wants to try to fix this. Do you believe her? Dorothy asked. No judgment in her voice, just honest curiosity. I don't know. Parts of it sound real. The stuff about Preston's family, about Tyler and Emma, that rings true. But I've been fooled before. She's always been good with words, good at knowing what people want to hear. Then take your time. Make her wait. Make her prove it. Dorothy leaned forward. Eleanor, I'm going to tell you something I've never told anyone. About a year ago, Billy reached out. My son. Sent a similar letter, actually. Long apology, lots of regret, asked if we could start over. What did you do? I said no. Dorothy's face was unreadable. I told him that ship had sailed, that some things break beyond repair, that I'd built a life without him and I was happy. I told him to leave me alone. Do you regret it? Dorothy was quiet for a long moment. Every day. And also never. It's both things at once, Eleanor. I can hold both the rightness of my decision and the sadness of what it cost me. Maybe that's what being older is. Understanding that most big choices don't have clear right answers. They just have consequences you learn to live with. So what should I do? That's not for me to say. But I'll tell you what I've learned living in this lighthouse for 13 years, watching the tide come in and go out twice a day, every day never stopping. Change is constant. People change. Circumstances change. The person Rebecca was when she dropped you off here isn't the person she is now. Maybe she's worse. Maybe she's better. But she's different, guaranteed. The question is whether you want to find out how. I read the letter 3 more times that day. Each time, I found something new, a phrase that seemed genuine, a justification that seemed hollow, a promise that seemed either heartfelt or calculated, depending on how I read it. By evening, I was exhausted from the emotional whiplash. That night, I walked down to the beach. It was April now, still cold but with hints of spring in the air. The lighthouse beam swept across the water in its eternal rhythm. I stood at the edge of the surf and thought about everything that had happened in the 6 months since Rebecca left me here. I thought about the woman I'd been, invisible, dispensable, defined entirely by my usefulness to others. And I thought about who I'd become, someone with her own purpose, her own voice, her own power. Dorothy had given me that transformation, but I'd done the work. I'd written the essays. I'd built the following. I'd created the Sea Change Project not as revenge but as revolution, personal revolution, the kind that starts with one woman deciding she matters. Rebecca hadn't given me that. In fact, she tried to take it away. But her betrayal had created the space for me to find it. Did I owe her forgiveness? No. Did she deserve another chance? Maybe not. But did I want to spend the rest of my life holding on to anger, even righteous anger, even justified anger? Did I want the story to end here, with me triumphant and alone, or did I want to see if there was more? Something harder and more complicated than simple victory? I pulled out my phone and opened my email. Started typing. Dear Rebecca, I wrote. You can visit in 3 weeks. Come alone. No Preston, no kids. Just you. We need to talk, just the 2 of us, before anything else can happen. I'm not promising forgiveness. I'm not promising we'll rebuild what we lost. But I'm promising I'll listen. Sometimes that's all we can offer each other, the willingness to listen and the courage to speak the truth. If you're ready for that, I'll be here. The address is below. There's a lighthouse. You'll know it when you see it. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. When Rebecca arrived 3 weeks later, driving a modest sedan instead of the Mercedes SUV, wearing jeans and a simple sweater instead of designer everything, I barely recognized her. She looked tired. Older. Smaller somehow. When she got out of the car and saw me standing on Dorothy's porch, not the cottage, never that cottage again, she started crying before she even reached me. "Mom," she said, and it was the first time in years she'd said it like she meant it. We didn't hug. Not then. That would come later, or maybe it wouldn't. But we sat on Dorothy's porch. Dorothy had made herself scarce, bless her, and we talked. Really talked. For 6 hours, we unpacked everything. The resentment and fear and insecurity that had driven her decisions. The hurt and betrayal and anger that had consumed me. The way we'd both contributed to the breakdown, even though the scales weren't balanced, even though what she'd done was worse than anything I'd ever done to her. It wasn't easy. There were more tears, raised voices, moments when I wasn't sure we'd get through it. But we did. And at the end of it, I didn't have clarity or closure or any of those neat, tidy things therapy promises you. What I had was something more real, a daughter who was trying, imperfectly, to be better. And a choice to let her try. "I can't be who I was before," I told her as the sun set over the ocean. "That woman is gone. She had to die for me to survive. So if we're going to rebuild anything, it has to be new. Different. Based on who we actually are now, not who we were or who we wish we'd been." "I know," Rebecca said. "I don't want who you were before anyway. I want this version. The one who fights back. The one who demands to be seen. The one who built something beautiful out of something broken." 3 months later, Tyler and Emma came to visit. We spent a week together, me, Rebecca, the kids and Dorothy, who'd become as much family to me as anyone I'd ever known. We explored tide pools. We climbed to the top of the lighthouse. We made elaborate sandwiches and sat on the beach watching the waves. Emma called me Grandma without anyone having to prompt her. Tyler asked if he could read my essays for his English class project on personal narrative. Preston never came. Rebecca and I agreed that was fine. Some relationships aren't meant to be repaired, and sometimes the most honest thing you can do is acknowledge that and move on. I still write the Sea Change project. I still work at the library and tutor struggling students. I still live in Dorothy's lighthouse keeper house. She legally added me to the deed last month, told me that when she's gone, she wants me to keep the lighthouse going, keep it as a refuge for women who need reminding that they matter. Rebecca and I talk once a week. Sometimes more. It's not perfect. We still hurt each other sometimes, still stumble over the complicated history between us. But we keep trying. That's more than I expected. More than I thought I'd get. If you've stayed with me this whole time, thank you. Thank you for witnessing this story, for seeing me through the words I've written. I started this journey thinking revenge would heal me. But what actually healed me was choosing to build something new instead of destroying what was broken. Was finding a friend in Dorothy who taught me that being abandoned doesn't mean being finished. Was learning that the best revenge isn't making someone pay, it's becoming someone they can't ignore, someone who matters on her own terms. So here's what I want you to take from this. If someone has made you feel invisible, make yourself visible. If someone has tried to erase you, write yourself back into the story, your own story, not theirs. If someone has taken your power, build new power from whatever materials you have left. A crumbling cottage can become a lighthouse if you're willing to do the work. And if you've ever been left behind, abandoned, erased, or told you don't matter, you do. You always did. You just needed the right light to see it. I'm Eleanor Hartwell. I'm 69 years old. I live in a lighthouse with my best friend and I matter. Not because my daughter finally admitted I do, but because I decided I do. That's the only approval that ever really counts. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, if you know someone who needs to hear it, please share it. And check the description box below for more stories like this one. Stories about women who refused to disappear, who found their voices when the world tried to silence them, who discovered that the best revenge is a life well lived on your own terms. The tide goes out. The tide comes in. The lighthouse keeps turning. And I'm still here, still standing, still shining my own light. That's enough. That's everything.